Um, Hi everyone, I'm Rachna. I'm the secretary of the Cybersecurity Club. I'm so excited that you all are here. Today we are going to be talking about ethical hacking, what it is, how we can get started, and what we have in the future workshops and what's the plan for the semester. So let's just get started. Tala, you can switch to the next slide, please. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to start with just introducing what an ethical hacker is. So it actually was first used at MIT in the 1960s. So during that time, a group of computer science students were working on artificial intelligence, and they would hack at a problem until they had a solution. So at that time, the term hacker, it was not associated with any malice, but as time passed, now when we hear the word hacker, it often has a negative connotation. So we think of hacker as someone who's trying to break into a system or steal information, steal data, or release malware. But we know that sometimes there are different subcultures of hackers, but many people tend to group all hackers under the term hacker, but there is a difference. So the three main types of hackers are black hat, gray hat, and white hat hackers. So the black hat hackers are considered to be the bad guys. The term black hat or a cracker is interchangeable, so they may try to crack the code or crack a password, and their main objective is to cause harm by engaging in criminal activity. And then we have the white hat hackers. So these guys are considered to be the good guys, and they are considered to be ethical hackers. So they have the support of the government, the support of the industry, and computer experts. A lot of times they are contract employees, so they're hired by security companies and trained to test systems, attempt to break into them, or they can also be an internal team who are just conducting regular penetration testing as part of their overall security plan. The third type of hacker, most common type of third hacker is the gray hat hacker, who sits between the good guys and the bad guys, and they try to gain access to a system without permission, but they don't have any malicious intent. So they just want to see if they can access the system, and then they notify the organization that their system was vulnerable. So they don't really have any criminal intentions. Uh, so let's talk about ethical hacking. So ethical hacking enables an organization to fine-tune their security posture, educate their staff, and implement security practices that protect critical systems and sensitive data. So if you want to be an ethical hacker, you need to have a lot of security knowledge of weaknesses, vulnerabilities, and how you would mitigate a certain situation. So it is your responsibility to identify these vulnerabilities. What are some qualities of an ethical hacker? Be patient and have persistence. So not only do ethical hackers need to find vulnerabilities, they also need to suggest or implement methods to reduce the threat. So training is essential for this. And then if we look at the term ethical, that implies that the person understands what is right and what is wrong. So ethical hacking is always evolving, and right now more than ever, it is an essential security practice that every organization should perform on a regular basis. Okay, Tala, next slide, please. Okay, yeah, you can take it from here, Tala.
Well, thank you for having me here today, and I'm excited to talk about the 5 phases of ethical hacking. So we have reconnaissance, scanning, gaining access, maintaining access, and covering tracks. So starting with phase 1, reconnaissance is the phase where the ethical hacker will make a map of the network and learn more about the target's physical aspects. Some things the ethical hacker would want to learn more about is the IP address range, network, and DNS records of the target. And there are two types of reconnaissance. You have passive reconnaissance and active reconnaissance. A passive attack involves acquiring information without directly interacting with the target, such as searching public records or news releases of an organization. Open source intelligence, or OSINT, is something to consider for passive attacks as well. An active attack includes interacting with the target directly by any means. For example, an active attack may be used to identify hosts or routers. Footprinting refers to identifying detailed information about a system. It's often part of a larger reconnaissance attack. Remember, reconnaissance provides a big picture view of network or servers in a DMZ. So footprinting is the process of collecting as much information as possible about a target network and is the first step of any attack on information systems. The ethical hacker will gather publicly available sensitive information by using various ways to intrude into an organization's network system. Some ways to look for security loopholes would be first knowing the security posture, which would allow attackers to know the external security posture of the target organization. Reducing the focus area to a detailed range of IP address networks, domain names, or remote access is another common method because it would be easier to only scan 1 or 2 IP addresses instead of 10,000. You could also identify vulnerabilities by scanning ports or banner graphs, and finally, you could draw the network map, which would allow the ethical hacker to know all about the actual environment that they are going to break into. If you're an ethical hacker for a company, you may just be told to check for security loopholes on a website, and that's all that's given to you, the URL of the website. So some tools that you could use is a search engine to find more information about the target. Use NSLOOKUP, which is a DNS record tool to collect a domain name, IP address range, and an IP address map of the target. The next tool you could use is which is a browser-based query and response tool that is mainly used to get the registration and details of the target. For example, with WhoIsLookup, you can find out who the website is registered to and the connection and contact information. This information actually plays more of an important role to hacking the application than you would think, as it will set the ethical hacker up for the next phases. All right, and Rachana, back to you.
Sure, thank you. So this is phase 1 of ethical hacking, right? Reconnaissance and footprinting. Very important. Most of the times when you are working through these 5 phases, reconnaissance and footprinting takes up the most amount of time, right? You need to find as much information as you can about the target before you actually start drilling down into them. So our plan for this workshop or this event that we're having right now is to walk you guys through the 5 phases of ethical hacking and show you the outlines for our future workshops. So what we're going to do is after this event, we are going to have workshops for all the 5 phases of ethical hacking. So here's the outline for the first workshop that we are going to be conducting. So for the reconnaissance workshop, we are going to be looking at some high and low-tech tools to scout our target. So again, in the workshop, we will go into much more detail about what reconnaissance is, and then we'll be using some open source tools, search engines, Google hacking database, to gather some competitive intelligence. And then we'll also look at the role of social media and the importance of tracking your online reputation. Another thing that we are going to do is look at email and website footprinting. So emails can tell us a lot of information about the target. So looking into the email headers, gaining more information from that. And then for mirroring websites, there's this tool called HT Track. So sometimes in a web page, when it's vulnerable, you have passwords hidden in plain sight if you know where to look for it. So using some tools like HT Track, we can download the website into a local directory and then maybe search for some hidden comments or passwords that we can parse through and then drill down into the target. And then we can also use some tools like Ping and ICMP to look at some ways into footprinting a network and show us how we can use domains to investigate a certain target. So this is the tentative outline for the workshop. If you are interested at the end of this event, you feel free to drop your email in the chat if you are not a member currently, and we can add you to our email list. Okay, Tala, you can go to the next slide.
All right, so next is phase 2, which is scanning. So scanning is sometimes confused with reconnaissance, but scanning is actually more in depth as the ethical hacker will find all the fine details of the target. Overall, scanning allows you to decide which point of entry you can take into a network. As an ethical hacker, you would need to think about points on the target system or network that a hacker could use to gain access. The pre-attack phase in scanning refers to when an attacker scans the network for detailed information on the basis of information gathered during reconnaissance. For example, the ethical hacker can use different scanning methods such as the use of dialers, port scanners, network mappers, ping tools, and vulnerability scanners. The ethical hacker can also extract information such as live machines, port status, OS details, device type, system uptime, things like that, to launch an attack. Network sniffing can also be used. It is the process of monitoring and capturing all data packets passing through a given network, and is a form of wiretap that can be applied to networks. Many organizations' switch ports are open, and anyone in the same physical location can plug into the network using an Ethernet cable. So network sniffing can gain sensitive information such as the DNS traffic, email traffic, web traffic, chat sessions, syslog traffic, telnet passwords, router configuration, and FTP passwords. As an ethical hacker, you would want to collect information on active ports and active hosts during your scan, because these are parts that are live and running on the system. For example, if there are 1,000 computers in a company's network and 100 are shut down, there would be no point in scanning the 100 that are off, because if you were an ethical hacker, you want to passively or actively gain control on a computer that is currently running. You would then want to know more about the services that the company is running, like intrusion detection or firewall, because as an ethical hacker, you'd want to find the points of entry in the network that would let you in undetected. Finally, you would want to gain more information about the application and operating system by looking for parts that are unpassed, which is another way of saying it has security loopholes. And as an ethical hacker, you would want to use these weaknesses to hack your target. Here are some tools that an ethical hacker can use during the scanning phase. The OpenVAS is an open source framework that has several services and tools for vulnerability scanning and management. The next tool is NITO, which is a command line vulnerability scanner and scans services for common gateway interference and things like that. So as an ethical hacker, if you find an outdated or unpatched service, there's a good chance that you will find a weakness from your target as well. Wireshark is another tool for wireless networks and is a source packet analyzer. HPing3 is a Kali tool that is a command line oriented TCP/IP packet assembler and analyzer. It can provide advanced port scanning, firewall testing, and remote uptime guessing. Nessus and Mmap are two more tools that can be used. Nessus does cost money, but it is a high-performance data capture tool and is overall more complete than Mmap. But Mmap is faster and it's also free. and it provides various types of scans along with it.
Okay, so for the scanning workshop that we have planned, we will show you how to dive deeper into the system and look for valuable data and services. So we'll look for these services in a specific IP address range. So network scans are also a key tool in the toolkit of ethical hackers. So we are going to be looking at different scanning tools and techniques to obtain information from a target system. We will be using specially crafted packets, TCP flags, UDP scans, and ping sweeps. If these terms sound familiar to you, that's awesome. If it doesn't, that's okay. That's why we're here. These workshops will help you learn the foundations and the basic skills for scanning and all the other things required to become an ethical hacker. And then we'll also show you how hackers can identify live systems or live hosts using protocols, how we can blueprint a network and use the tools that Tala mentioned about, so NICTO, HPing, all of those to perform vulnerability scans to find weaknesses. And then at the end, we'll also show how we can mitigate this. So how we can counter the detection, how we can conceal and spoof our, whatever we did. So we also want to make sure that we are able to counter detection at the end. And then Tala also mentioned Nmap, which is very, very useful, and it is free. So we'll be using Nmap to separate and filter a range of IP addresses, save it to a file, and then scan it. And then that is sort of a basic activity that we can do with Nmap. Okay, you can go to the next slide, Tala. Thanks.
All right. So the next phase is gaining access, phase 3. In this phase, the ethical hacker will use exploitation tools to hack the target. The ethical hacker will take advantage of the vulnerabilities that she or he found and gain access by selecting the appropriate attack that corresponds with the found weaknesses, then launch the attack, and then finally the ethical hacker will gain access. Some tools that are used in this phase is BEEF, which is a tool used for mainly penetration testing and is a tool that can leverage browser vulnerabilities. Next is Metasploit, which is a popular exploitation tool that provides hundreds of scripts to use during hacking. EtherCap is a tool that is able to perform attacks against the protocol by positioning itself as man in the middle. It is able to infect, replace, or delete data in a connection and even provide fake SSL certificates in HTTPS or discover passwords for protocols such as FTP and HTTP. HPing 3 is listed here again, as it can also launch a denial of service attack by using TCP SYN flooding. And finally, you can use SQL map that automates detection and exploration of SQL injection flaws.
All right, so let's set the stage right here. So at this point, we have obtained a great deal of information about the systems on our target, so the reconnaissance phase is complete. And then scanning and mapping the network is done, and we have gained knowledge, maybe the model and the version of the devices and systems, the listening services that are going on, the evidence of data being sent in. We have all of that going on. So phase 2 is complete as well. So now we know what systems are live, and we also know what operating systems are available. So now we begin the third phase, which is gaining access or system hacking. So in our workshop, we'll have the following activities. We'll have obtaining the password and escalating privilege. So for obtaining the password, there are a bunch of different ways you can do this. we'll be looking at some tools that we can use for that. John the Ripper is a pretty good tool which can be used for cracking passwords. And then some other ones are using rainbow table, social engineering, or even passive sniffing through Wireshark. So Wireshark is this tool which will look at all the packets that are coming through, and we can analyze the packets and passively look for some passwords that could be there. And then we'll look at privilege escalation, so finding a vulnerable point in the system and gaining access, and from there escalating our privileges and our roles so that we can have much more control over the system. And lastly, we'll also be trying out simulating some denial of service attacks. So right now, denial of service attacks is still a really huge threat in the cyberspace, right? And there's like numerous types of attacks out there. But we'll be looking at the basic methods hackers use to flood networks and damage services. So I've listed some examples over there of the denial of service attacks we can execute and simulate. Okay, next slide.
Great. The next phase is maintaining access, phase 4. So now, as an ethical hacker, you will want to see how you can maintain access. In this phase, the hacker will install software or make changes on the target, such as the target can be it can be accessed easily in the future, so the process will not have to be started over from scratch. If you're thinking like a hacker, then the hacker may want to install backdoors, which is a convenient tool for establishing easy access into the already breached system. Or you may want to create a covert channel, which is a way to transport encrypted data and will require considerable efforts on the part of the target to divert it. They could also create new users and escalate privileges of those users. So normal user would be escalated to a super user. They could also install rootkits, which is a type of malware that is highly adept at hiding itself from a computer system, and it can also easily bypass security measures. And finally, they could use Trojans. So for example, a Trojan horse provides access at the application level and can install themselves as a service and run as a local system, which would give them administrative access. Some popular tools for maintaining access is PowerSploit, which is mainly used for Windows systems and provides a way to connect to the target's PowerShell. And a PowerShell is a place where you can run system commands from. And then next is Weavly, which is a PHP web shell that can be used to install stealth backdoors or manage web accounts. DNS2 TCP is a network tool that you can also use, and it relays TCP connections through DNS traffic. The last tool that you can use is Netcat, which is a network tool that relays TCP and it will allow you to read and write to a network connection using the TCP and UDP protocol. The most common use for Netcat is to set up reverse and bind shells, piping and redirecting network traffic, port listening, debugging programs and scripts, and banner grabbing. Some similar tools, though, to Netcat would be SBD, which is a tool that helps to connect a victim's machine anytime or a target's machine. And CryptCat is another similar one, which allows an TCP and UDP encryption connection to make TCP and UDP connections with the target.
Okay, so for our maintaining access workshop, we will be looking at using some keyloggers. Actual Spy has a keylogger which can be downloaded. So keyloggers which will record every keystroke on your keyboard, right? So we'll look at how hackers use that on their target's machine and send reports to the hackers so that they can know when to execute the attack. So we'll be looking at it from that viewpoint, where we create a key logging report and analyze the key logging report and look at how we can gain more information through that. And then we will be talking about the NTFS data stream. So this data stream was originally designed to provide compatibility with non-Windows file systems, but now it has been used to allow data to be stored in hidden files that are linked to the regular visible file. So we'll be looking at how we can use that to create some hidden files, and then steganography. So for this, we will be looking at whitespace steganography, and then there's an open source tool called Unicode steganography, and they have different carriers through which we can hide the information, and we'll be looking at some of the different ways in which we can hide it. There's even audio steganography, so MP3 stego, which can utilize MP3s to save some information. Okay, next slide, please.
All right. And finally, we got phase 5, which is covering tracks. So covering tracks is a phase all about covering identity in the exploit. If you're thinking like a hacker, you'd want to know how you're able to gain access and maintain it. And no hacker wants to get caught, right? So as an ethical hacker, you'd want to figure out how a hacker can erase information regarding the hacker's identity and how the exploit was carried out. This involves modifying, corrupting, or deleting the values of logs, modifying registry values, and uninstalling all applications he or she used, and deleting folders that were created. Common ways of clearing tracks can include clearing cache, tampering log files, and you would want to delete or alter any log files that were not obvious. Finally, you would want to close ports or stop the services that you installed in maintaining access. As an ethical hacker, you will then report to the organization that hired you and create documents for them of the vulnerabilities and loopholes and your recommendations on how to make the security better. So I'm sure there's some tools out there for covering tracks, but I wanted to share some common command prompts that could be used. So first, in newer versions of Metasploit's Metinterpreter, there's a script called clear EV to clear all the event logs. This program will go into the event logs on a Windows system and clear out all the logs. So once Metinterpreter is on a system, simply type Metinterpreter clear EV as it says on the screen, and that would get that done. Another way to clear log files on a Windows system is to use clearlogs.exe file, and you can download it among other utilities from VidStorm Labs. When you have the physical access to the system, you can simply install it and then run clear logs. You can choose to clear the security, application, or security logs, and for example, to clear the security logs, you could type clearlogs.exe set, as it says on the screen. Next, in Linux systems, log files are stored in the var log directory. So you can open and view that plain text, and that plain text file will contain log messages, and you can also open it up with any text editor, such as the kwrite var log messages, as shown on the screen. And another thing to consider is that you would want to erase the command history. So for example, a bash shell will save over about 500 of the last commands, and a system admin could track all the commands and detect or decipher activities and potentially use those as evidence. So as an ethical hacker, you'd want to look out for that. But to see the history, you can use the commands listed on the left side of the screen. So you have how to view your history, how to check the size, and then how to set it back to 0. And then finally, another option you could do would be to shred the history. And you just shred the history by the command listed on the left, and it will overwrite the history and delete files. All right.
Awesome. Okay. So for covering tracks, the workshop will be using all the commands that were listed above in the previous slides and seeing how it will delete all the history. And then we'll also be looking at disabling logging and hiding files. So in the Windows system, we have the audit policies, which we can use to disable the logging and make sure that nothing is being recorded. And then once we leave, we set it back to whatever it was before. Yeah, so this workshop will pretty much look at both Windows and Linux and show how we can cover up the tracks. Okay, next slide. Okay, so is pretty much the end of our presentation. We covered the 5 phases of ethical hacking and laid out the plan for upcoming workshops. So yeah, I think Avi has already requested for the emails in the chat. That's awesome. Yeah, so if you are interested and you would like to participate in these workshops, please do drop your email if you haven't already. So this event was free, just to let you guys know what we have planned for you all. But the following events are not going to be free. We have a lifetime membership of just $10. And then you get access to all the future events, all the future workshops. So along with the workshops, we also have industry visits that happen from time to time. So there's people from different areas of security come in and talk to us about what are some of the different careers you could have, and just talk about their day-to-day life. So it's always interesting. And if you are interested in being a part of this group, don't forget to leave your email. And yeah, if you have any questions, we will take it now. If you have any questions, you can use the chat or just unmute yourself. Yeah, we'd love to hear if you guys would like to know anything more. Okay, I would like to know how is AI used in security? Okay, so I'm going to open up the floor to any of the officers who would like to pitch in and answer it. I don't want to be the only one talking.
You know how machine learning is a part of AI. So basically, over time, it'll look for I guess like patterns to learn itself. So, for example, like if it keeps seeing if you keep giving it like images of a dog, right? It's gonna start like, oh, I know what a dog is. So it's kind of the same thing, like in security, they're starting to use it more to start detecting, for example, like malware. So if it sees like, if it keeps being exposed to malware over time, it'll start noticing what flaws to look for in security systems. So that's one way machine learning is used. It can start learning what to look for different vulnerabilities and start picking them up on their own. But it's relatively newer from what I understand, so yeah.
All right, I have something else to add too. Now I got my project pulled up. So you have machine learning to go off that. They have supervised learning and unsupervised learning, and they can actually output a table of data where the rows will be data samples and the columns will be features, which are determining factors. And then remember, like a subset of machine learning, I'm sure as you know, is deep learning, which is more advanced, and that would be the neural networks that I talked about, like Anne's earlier. But some of the techniques in AI in relation to cybersecurity would be the decision trees, k-nearest neighbor, support vectors, artificial neural networks. They also have self-organizing maps and biologically impaired techniques. And for example, one thing that is affecting cybersecurity today is the fake news. And it's considered a cyber attack because it can often sway popular opinion. So k-nearest neighbor and decision trees are two AI techniques that are currently being used to improve the flagging technique that they have on posts and social media.
Are there any other questions from the participants about the workshops or anything in general? But yeah, thanks again for coming in. This is the end of it. If you do have any questions, you can stick around. But otherwise, thanks again for coming in. Have a good day and bye.